The tornado ripped through the hospital like a hungry beast. Power died instantly. Life support machines fell silent. "We're losing them!" A doctor screamed, frantically pumping a ventilation bag as monitors went dark across the ICU. Greenfield, a modest Midwest town of 15,000, had never experienced an F4 tornado before. The funnel cloud had torn through the county hospital with methodical destruction, collapsing 2 wings entirely. Only the main building remained standing, though severely damaged. Inside, 22 critical patients were trapped without power, 6 dependent on ventilators and life support. Outside, rain pounded the wreckage as emergency lights cast eerie shadows across terrified faces. The hospital's backup generators hummed desperately, their fuel supplies dwindling by the minute. Regular rescue was impossible. Roads were blocked by fallen trees and power lines. Cell towers were down, and radio communication functioned sporadically at best. The backup generators could sustain critical equipment for only 2 hours, 3 if it diverted power from non-essential areas. Oxygen reserves were limited. The nearest medical center with capacity for critical patients was in Springfield, 80 miles away through storm-ravaged countryside and worsening weather. Mike Howard was refueling his Bell 407 helicopter at a small airfield 10 miles away when he noticed a distinctive funnel cloud. The 41-year-old former Army pilot had flown UH-60 Blackhawks through sandstorms in Iraq and mountain turbulence in Afghanistan during 3 tours. Now working for AgriSky, a local agricultural aviation company, he'd been inspecting storm damage to crops when his military instincts kicked in. Something was wrong, and people needed help. He could feel it. Mike spotted the desperate red flares as he approached the hospital, landing in the parking lot amid debris. He was immediately surrounded by medical staff. Dr. Sarah Chun, the head of emergency medicine, briefed him rapidly, her voice steady despite the chaos. 22 critical patients, 6 on life support with manual ventilation. Roads blocked, communications down. Generator has maybe 2 hours left. Mike fell back on his military training, methodically collecting critical information. He noted patient conditions, resources, personnel available. He studied his weather radar app, showing the storm system's movement. 3 questions dominated his assessment: transport capacity per flight, distance to Springfield Memorial, and the window between storm cells. His Black Hawk experience told him this was a multiple sortie mission with deteriorating conditions. "How many can we lose if we do nothing?" he asked. "All 6 critical within hours." More conditions worsened. Dr. Chen replied without hesitation. Mike's weather app updated with severe warning. A second storm cell was forming, potentially stronger than the first. Lightning flashed in the distance, illuminating the determination on his face. Inside, a nurse rushed toward Dr. Chun. Generator fuel burning faster than expected. Maybe 90 minutes left. Simultaneously, a code blue was called in the ICU. 2 patients were deteriorating rapidly, without proper ventilation support. The manual bagging was keeping them alive, but barely. The town's emergency management reported that road clearance would take at minimum 8 hours. The situation wasn't just urgent. It was becoming impossible. Mike tried raising other medical helicopters on his radio. Static. The hospital satellite phone connected briefly to Springfield Memorial, only to learn their rescue helicopters were grounded due to weather conditions. The hospital's helipad had sustained structural damage, with visible cracks across the concrete. Unsafe for repeated landings with patients. "What about military rescue?" someone asked. "National Guard helicopters are deployed for flood rescue 2 counties over," Mike explained. "Even if they could divert, approval channels could take hours." Dr. Chen stared at Mike. "We don't have hours." Conventional options were exhausted. This would require unconventional thinking. Mike stepped away, staring at the storm clouds. His mind flashed back to Baghdad, 2008. 3 wounded soldiers, nighttime dust storm, critical transport needed. His commander had said it was impossible. He'd flown anyway. Risk assessment isn't about avoiding danger. His flight instructor had drilled into him. It's about determining if the risk of action outweighs the certainty of inaction. Mike calculated rapidly. Weather patterns, fuel consumption, weight restrictions, night flying conditions. The risk was extreme. But doing nothing guaranteed deaths. I've flown worse, he thought. Not by much, but worse. The decision crystallized, not as a civilian pilot, but as a soldier. Mike gathered the medical team. My Bell 407 can take 2 critical patients plus 1 medical staff per flight. For flight's minimum to evacuate all critical cases. Dr. Chin nodded. We'll prioritize the ventilator-dependent patients first. I need the lightest medical equipment possible, Mike continued. Every pound costs fuel and maneuverability. They transformed the helicopter into a flying ICU with remarkable efficiency. For bags hung from ceiling hooks meant for crop sprayers. Ventilation equipment secured with military-grade tie-downs Mike kept in his emergency kit. Battery packs were distributed for essential monitoring devices. We're basically building a medevac bird from scratch, Mike muttered, his hands working with practiced precision. As Mike prepared the helicopter, his mind flashed to Fort Rucker, Alabama. Captain Davis shouting over the rotor noise during advanced weather training. You feel that shudder? That's your blade efficiency dropping. Correct now or die. He remembered the high-altitude mountain environmental training in Colorado, where he'd learned to read wind patterns from vegetation movement and cloud formations. The specialized night vision device certification that taught him to fly when others couldn't see. The countless hours in simulators where instructors threw every possible emergency at him until responses became instinct. You're never truly ready, his instructor would say, but being trained for chaos means you can function while others panic. That training, the endless drills, the brutal simulations, the hard-earned muscle memory, was about to save lives. Mike unfolded his backup navigation maps, drawing lines with a greased pencil. The standard route to Springfield was impossible, directly through the storm's path. Instead, he plotted an unconventional approach. We'll use terrain masking, he explained to Dr. Chin. Flying in the lee of these ridge lines will shield us from the worst crosswinds. Mike pointed his GPS. I've programmed waypoints based on visual landmarks that should remain visible even in low conditions. Water towers, radio masts, highway intersections. If communications fail completely, I'll navigate by terrain recognition. The medical staff looked skeptical. It's a military technique, Mike continued. When enemy forces jam GPS signals, we navigate using terrain association. The storm is just another enemy. He calculated fuel consumption with military precision, adding safety margins for headwinds and potential diversions. The math was tight, dangerously tight, but possible. We'll perform a running drop-off procedure at Springfield. I won't shut down engines between deliveries. It saves critical minutes and fuel. Mike transformed a civilian helicopter using military loading principles. Weight distribution was critical for maintaining control in turbulence. He directed the placement of equipment with the precision of a loadmaster. We'll fly using NOE techniques, nap of the earth, he explained. It's a military low-altitude flying method that uses terrain features for protection. We'll stay below 200 feet when possible, following natural land contours. He demonstrated tactical auto-rotation procedures to the medical team. If we lose power, this is how we'll land without engines. It's not pretty, but it's survivable. For navigation through low-visibility areas, Mike adapted the talking pilot method from his Black Hawk days, verbalizing each action to maintain situational awareness. In the military, we train for worst-case scenarios, he said, checking tie-downs with practiced hands. We're taking a civilian helicopter and civilian medical equipment and applying military protocols. It's not ideal, but neither is leaving patients to die. Mike quickly trained 2 nurses, Lisa and Marcus, as his in-flight medical crew. Forget normal hospital protocols, he instructed. We're running battlefield medicine now. He taught them essential hand signals for in-flight communication, knowing radio communication might fail in the storm. Tap your head if a patient is crashing. Point to your equipment if you need me to change altitude for equipment function. With the ground crew, he established landing zone procedures straight from his military playbook. Improvised wind indicators using torn sheets, makeshift perimeter lighting using flashlights, and debris clearance patterns to maintain safe approaches. Move like you've done this 100 times, even if it's your first, he advised. The first takeoff was tense but successful. 2 critical patients were secured aboard, with Lisa maintaining manual ventilation for 1. The Bell 407 lifted shakily in gusting winds, its frame protesting against lateral forces that threatened to push it into nearby trees. Mike employed his military crosswind takeoff technique, applying opposite cyclic control while managing torque with practiced foot movements. The helicopter responded, climbing through rain sheets toward the first waypoint. Severe turbulence hit 20 minutes in, dropping them 200 feet in seconds. Without hesitation, Mike executed the recovery maneuver drilled into him during military training: collective up, gentle cyclic correction, power management. They reached Springfield Memorial 43 minutes later. The first patients were transferred, and Mike immediately turned back, racing against the encroaching storm front. On the second return trip, Mike's weather radar lit up with alarming data. A new tornado was forming directly in their path back to Greenfield. Lightning illuminated massive wall. Clouds ahead, a textbook supercell development. The safest course was aborting the mission and waiting out the storm. The radio crackled with the voice of Dr. Chun. Generator failing. Multiple patients deteriorating. Mike studied the radar, identifying a narrow corridor between storm cells. It was a military-grade risk assessment. The path existed but required perfect execution with zero margin for error. Springfield Tower, this is Agri-Sky 1. Continuing mission through Sector 4 Alpha. He transmitted calmly. Negative, Agri-Sky. That sector shows extreme weather. Advise holding position. Unable to comply. Lives at stake. Proceeding as planned. Visibility dropped to near zero as they entered the corridor. Rain hammered the windshield with machine gun intensity. The helicopter shuddered violently as competing wind currents battered it from multiple directions. Mike flew entirely by instruments now, his military training the only thing standing between control and catastrophe. The artificial horizon tilted wildly. Altitude warnings blared as downdrafts pushed them toward treetops. Vortex rings stayed imminent, Mike muttered, recognizing the dangerous condition where descending air could trap the helicopter in its own downwash. He executed the military recovery technique: slight forward cyclic, power reduction, then controlled power application. The Bell 407 wasn't a Black Hawk, but the physics were the same. Wind shear suddenly rolled them 45 degrees. Mike's hands moved with autonomous precision, countering each force instantaneously. The civilian helicopter was being pushed beyond design limits, but Mike flew it like a combat aircraft, demanding performance that the engineers never intended but had accidentally built in. The fuel warning light illuminated with an insistent beep. The detour was consuming their reserves faster than calculated. Mike did the math. They could reach the hospital, load patients, but might not make it back to Springfield. The alternative was turning back now, saving themselves and the crew, but abandoning the remaining patients. What's the warning? Marcus asked from the medical station. Nothing important, Mike replied, pushing forward through the torrent. He remembered the soldier's creed drilled into him years ago. I will never leave a fallen comrade. These weren't soldiers, but the principle remained unchanged. Mission first. Mike identified a farm pond through a brief clearing, using it as a terrain reference. He applied a military terrain flying technique called contouring, following landscape features rather than maintaining constant altitude. This reduced exposure to crosswinds while providing visual references. To conserve fuel, he employed the military technique of pressure altitude flying, adjusting power settings constantly to maintain optimal efficiency despite changing air density in the storm. When lightning struck dangerously close, he utilized a lightning position offset, procedure developed for military aircraft, changing heading by 15 degrees to reduce electrical attraction while maintaining general course. Against all probability, the hospital appeared to the rain curtain. The medical staff stared in disbelief as the helicopter descended through howling winds. They had given up hope, already moving patients to interior hallways as the last generator sputtered. "He came back," whispered a nurse, tears mixing with raindrops. Families of patients embraced each other, watching the helicopter door open. Inside, the remaining critical patients waited, Some unable to comprehend that their lives were being saved by impossibility, a helicopter flying through what pilots called unflyable conditions. All 22 critical patients reached Springfield Memorial safely. Mike's final landing occurred with fuel warnings blaring in his headset. The gauge read 0 as the blade stopped turning. The helicopter had nothing left to give, much like its pilot, who slumped in exhaustion against the controls. When reporters surrounded Mike the next day, his response was classically military. "I just applied my training. Anyone with similar background would have made the same call." When pressed about the extreme risk, he shrugged. The real heroes were the medical staff keeping patients alive until transport was possible. "I just drove the bus." Springfield Memorial's chief of medicine called it the most remarkable civilian medical evacuation I've witnessed in 30 years. The governor mentioned Mike in her emergency response address. Social media exploded with hashtag StormPilot posts. Yet Mike seemed uncomfortable with the attention, repeatedly redirecting praise to the medical teams and first responders. "In the Army, we learned that impossible situations just require impossible efforts," Mike said during a brief statement. "Any veteran would tell you the same thing. We're trained to run toward problems, not away from them. The training stays with you long after the uniform comes off." 3 months later, Greenfield County established a military veterans emergency response team, integrating former service members into disaster planning. Mike now volunteers teaching emergency flight techniques to civilian pilots. Springfield Memorial added a military-inspired rapid deployment protocol for their emergency response system, modeled after battlefield medical evacuation procedures. Mike's actions exemplified how military training creates lasting value beyond battlefields. Veterans bring unique crisis management skills to civilian communities. The ability to function under extreme pressure, make rapid decisions with limited information, and prioritize mission success when failure means lives lost. These qualities remain their most valuable service to society. Do you know veterans who've used their military training to save lives in your community? Share their stories in the comments below. And if you see a veteran today, remember, their training and experience might someday make the difference between disaster and miracle. Subscribe for more extraordinary rescue stories.